Okay, so let's talk a bit about research in psychology. So, psychology originally was more philosophical, where people had opinions. This is how I think marriage should work. This is how I think children develop. And there wasn't a lot of research being done early on. Now that started to change in the 50s. We started getting more research-oriented, and in the past 30 years, we've had a lot of research published in psychology. So we're starting to get more and more research-based in our thoughts of how the mind works, how emotions work, and so on. There's still a lot of areas where we need to do more research. There's always more research to do. But couples therapy, for instance, up until maybe the past 20 years, if you went to couples therapy, it actually increased your chance of divorce. That's not true anymore. It depends on who you go to. Basically, there's two research-based methods of couples therapy. So you need to find out if they are, what method of couples counseling they're using for you, because it may actually increase your chances of divorce. So it wasn't until we did research to prove what it is that makes couples successful that we started to be more able to help couples have success. Because prior to that, it was just their opinion. For instance, I statements. Have you ever heard that? I statements and you statements. So you should always use I statements because they're less provocative and they're not taken as a criticism. So I am upset because you never help with the dishes. Yeah.
What about it statements?
It statements?
So putting it on the action, not the person.
Yeah, it's not as common for therapists to teach that, but it could be something that they teach, especially if you're a narrative therapist or something, because you're trying to externalize the problem rather than blame it on you or the other person. So if you said, you never do the dishes, then supposedly that's more of an attack. But what we really found is that couples can use I statements to attack somebody just as easily as you statements. I think you're an idiot and totally lazy, and I don't know why I married you. Okay?
And boom, divorce.
Yes. So the use of I statements does not decrease divorce whatsoever. But there is a psychologist named John Gottman. Did you take my Psych 101? Okay, so you read the John Gottman book. Take my Psych 101 class if you haven't already. And you'll be able to learn about him. But he has done research for 30 years about couples who are successful. It's not just, I think this is what makes marriage work, but he actually found 4 ways of communicating with the other person during an argument that predicts whether you'll divorce or not in the next 5 years with 94% accuracy.
That's very interesting.
Yeah. Yep. So look up John Gottman. I think his book is Why Marriage Succeeds or Fails. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's an excellent book, and it's all research-based. So that's actually the type of couples therapy I was trained to do. So that's what I do outside of teaching and farming and wedding venues. I also do couples therapy and domestic violence therapy with the perpetrator, not the victim.
Hasn't it become a social norm now to see people divorced in their very first marriage?
Oh yes, yeah, very common. 50 to 60% chance of divorce with your first marriage, and then each marriage after that adds another 10%. So it's not good. Now that is including all risk factors. So that's also including the 17-year-old or the 14-year-old that gets married. So if you get married after 24 to 32, it are the lowest divorce rates. If you get married too old, that also increases your chance of divorce. If you marry somebody of the same religion and the same race as you have a lower chance of divorce. If you have lots of siblings, you have a lower chance of divorce because you've already learned how to put up with crap. So every sibling up to 7 decreases your chance of divorce 10%. So that's pretty good. Have lots of children and they have a better life. So if your siblings like the person you're going to marry, you have a lower chance of divorce. Not your parents, your siblings. Remember that. So this is why research is so important, because we would have all guessed if your parents hated the person you're marrying that's going to cause problems. But it doesn't actually. I mean, it might be annoying, but it doesn't increase the chance of divorce. But if your siblings... What was that?
The people that you're closest to, and that would be your siblings.
Yep, you're closest to your siblings. Your siblings' opinion is more important than your parents. And if you don't have siblings, you're in trouble.
How about remarriage and the children, and your children?
Like, if you get remarried, does it increase your children's chance of divorce later on?
No. How the children view the
Oh.
other person.
Yeah, I don't know the statistics on that. I'm sure that increases stress.
Well, I can tell you,
Yeah.
I'm 15 years, my husband's junior.
Oh,
He's white.
okay.
He had
That
3
increases
children,
stress.
8, 10, and 12. I was only 25. So you do the math.
Yeah.
So I'm sure a lot of bets have been paid off
Mhm.
by now. We've been
Yeah.
together 20.
Yeah, there's always.
Never mind, don't do the math. Don't do the math. Anyway, and then we have twins of our own that are now 15.
Yeah.
But I tell you, before we got married, we had to go see a couples counselor.
Yeah.
Because the kids were obstinate. They did not want to do anything. If I said, "Oh, could you put your backpack in your room?" I don't have to do it. Dad, do I have to? Do I have to? Dad? So we had to. Yeah, we had to. And now, it's all love, hearts and flowers, and grandbabies, and just love.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But it was tough.
Yeah.
And anybody
Blended
else
families
would
are
have totally walked out of that situation. I was only 25. I sure didn't need all of that. So.
Yeah, blended families that has to increase the chance of divorce. Yeah. But here's one thing to remember, okay? In psychology, we talk about these tendencies, these generalities. And if it is a tendency, that means there's exceptions. So that's the difference between tendency and stereotype. Stereotype says everybody's in this category. Whereas a generality says a lot of people are in this category, but there's also exceptions. Sometimes huge exceptions. So you had a successful marriage despite the odds being against you. I had a friend who, a much older friend, he was 90, but he got married when he was 14 and she was 12. They got married.
What?
And they were married 70 years, something like that.
Dang.
Yeah. And super happy. He called her old pudding face, and it was adorable. So the odds are against that. Although, of course, during their generation, getting married young wasn't all that crazy.
It's really common.
Right.
So
So 12-year-old
if she had children, she's a woman then, right?
Right, exactly. And she did have children very soon after that. All right, so research is important because we can prove, yes, this is what is happening. Well, prove is, we say prove in research, but the truth is you can never prove anything with research. You just increase the chances that this is true. Okay. You'd be amazed how many research things have been rejected later down the road. For instance, fat causes heart attacks, right? If you eat lots of fatty, greasy foods, you increase the chances of heart attacks, right? Wrong. The research does not support that. There was one study in the 60s that said that. The guy falsified, well, he didn't falsify the information, but he threw out the information that contradicted that. Like, there's many countries in the world that eat lots of fat and have very low heart disease. But he threw those out of the study and published a paper saying countries that eat lots of fat have more heart disease. But that actually isn't the case. So carbohydrates cause heart disease. They cause inflammation. Inflammation causes heart disease. Fat actually helps. All right, so goals of research in developmental psychology. To describe what is going on. What is normal development like? How does gender develop? What is going on? What is typical? Then we also want to explain it. Why does it develop this way? Is it developing this way because of genetic, biological maturation, and this is just normal for all human beings? Is this environmental, socially based? Is this social learning? Is this the unconscious driving us with psychosexual urges? Whatever it is, okay? We're trying to explain it. And then optimization. Now that we know what's going on, we have an idea why, how can we improve people's lives down the road? How can we make lives better? How do we make our children more intelligent? Americans are very obsessed with that. We want smart kids. And so we put them, we have all of these preschool educational things like the Head Start project or Abecedarian project. And those are supposed to get kids ahead of the game so that they're as smart as all the other kids. Like if you come from poverty, put the kid in Head Start and they'll be ahead of everybody else. Research shows that's not the case. Doesn't help. Matter of fact, pushing your child educationally at a young age decreases their IQ and decreases their educational accomplishments. You're much better just letting your kids run wild for the first few years of their life and play and do kid stuff. Finland is the #1 school system in the world right now, and they don't even allow kids to start school until 7 years old.
Good.
Yep. Because they believe if you force kids to knuckle down and study too early, they will hate learning, and then that delays their intellectual development.
And don't they learn best by doing for themselves?
Yes, and the kids learn best everybody learns best hands-on. You guys would learn all this better if you could just follow me around to my therapy sessions and I could show you, like you could do therapy sessions. You'd learn a lot better that way. But of course you have to like be with me over for the next decade to get all the information that I teach you in this 6-week class. Okay, so describe, explain, optimize. And then the idea is we're going to come up with a theory. That's really the explanation. What is the theory behind this development? And we're going to talk about that in the next chapter. Freud has a theory, Erickson has a theory, everybody has a theory of how people are developing. How we study people, there are many different ways. These are just a few of them. You can do self-reports, so I could pass out a questionnaire and you could talk about your experience in childhood or your attitudes towards marriage, or you guys have all done teacher evaluations. That's a self-report questionnaire. How did you feel about this class? Those are great because, of course, you're answering the information yourself, so hopefully you will have all that knowledge. It's not always the case. Sometimes we don't know what's going on with ourselves. We don't know why we're doing things. Sometimes we lie. If I'm asking you, if I pass out a questionnaire about your masturbation activity, you may not tell me the truth. You might be a little uncomfortable sharing that information with your professor. Okay, so sometimes we don't want to tell the truth. Men tend to over-exaggerate about their sexual experience. Women tend to under-exaggerate with their sexual experience. Okay. Nowadays, of course, if you're a virgin, there's some negative attitudes towards that. Although 25% of college students are still have their virginity, that is the statistic, and yet we think that everybody is having sex in college, and that's not actually the case, unless you go to San Diego State University. On average, students have 2 STDs. Each student, on average, has 2 STDs at that campus. Party school. That's why my uncle went there. That's gross now that I think about it. He's asking about his health history. Then we can observe. Observations are great because it's more natural. Now, some's more natural than others, so you can have naturalistic observation or lab observation. So if I wanted to see how kids were behaving at school, it'd probably be best for me to go to a school and watch them. It's much more natural. They don't feel awkward. I could bring kids into a laboratory setting and say, play with each other, and they'd be like, this is not school. They're not going to behave the same way they would in school, right? Although the nice thing about labs are that you can control the conditions. So if you want to study friendship in a class of 30 students, that could really, there's a lot of variability, a lot of chaos in that. Versus I could take 2 kids and put them in a lab, and then I could say, interact with each other, and now I only have those 2. So I want to study friendship between 2 people. It'd be better to get rid of the other people so that they're not interacting. And one great study was done. They put 2 girls in a room, 2 boys in a room, and they just said, go in this room and wait for the researcher. We'll be back in like 5 minutes. And then they just watched to see what the kids did. And the girls, there's chairs. They got the chairs, took them away from the wall, put them in the middle of the room, facing each other, and then they talked. They played games with each other. Boys got 2 chairs, they put them next to each other, and then they tended to do things without much talking. Okay? Which is interesting because that is generally male bonding versus female bonding. Female bonding is a lot of talking, a lot of complaining about other people, right? That bonds us. And men are like, let's go play basketball or fix a car together.
Yeah, that sounds like fun.
See? I'm like, basketball, let's go to Starbucks.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
in a classroom setting, if I have a parent come in to their kid is just acting out every day, and I have them come in to observe, which I don't think does any good, and it doesn't. Isn't it because the parent is there and they know it, and they're just as good as gold?
Yes, and that happens with researchers too. So even though they say this is natural, once the researcher enters the environment, you've changed the environment. So it's not 100% natural. You can be more or less obvious. So if you put a camera into the classroom and let the teachers, or parents, the last option, the parents watch it in another classroom and the kid doesn't even know the camera's there, now that they're going to act very natural. But if the parent comes in and sits at the desk next to their kid, that's going to be very unnatural. So even though it is the natural setting, they've changed the natural setting. It's been altered. And that's going to potentially change behavior.
And what I do think is also interesting about that is although the child's behavior changes, their peers' behavior does not change. So if they're acting out, they're going to continue to act out because it's not their parent.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting because it used to be that adult supervision, any adult, was good enough to have you sitting quietly, but now
that's because you used to walk around with a ruler and snap it on kids' knuckles. We need to start doing that again. I'm going to bring a ruler to the
They do that in schools in Haiti.
What was that? In Haiti, they still wrap the knuckles with.
They have you stand like this, like on one leg, and if you put your foot down, you get a spanking on your hand with the ruler, or on your behind.
When I was in kindergarten, they still spanked.
You use a paddle? That's what happened with my dad.
Yeah. When I was in kindergarten, they used to paddle. Not that I
They
would
make
have
you
gotten
go on your knees and
I was very smart.
smart.
Other kids
My mom would get her knuckles whacked with a ruler.
Yeah.
And she even had like the tiniest speck of dirt in her nails.
By the teacher?
Yeah. But she also
Wow.
went to a Catholic school, so I don't know.
Yeah,
what
it was
that
not
is.
so good. Yeah. Anybody who's gone to Catholic school has probably been traumatized. But then they also tend to be
But then again,
well-behaved in the classroom. Maybe not so well-behaved outside of the classroom, but I don't care how they
Catholic
behave.
kids are bad.
You know, we'll get into more parenting stuff, but when you are overly strict, you create rebellious children. But that does not mean that you should then become permissive, because you also create bad kids. So you have to have a balance of
When
Like,
to be strict,
when to be strict and when not.
Is it
Yeah.
authoritarian or authoritative?
Authoritative is the balanced one. Authoritarian is the overly strict one. I have a hard time with those two. Wait, did I get that right?
Yeah, you're right.
Yes.
You're right.
See, I can never remember. All right, I think we talked about all of that. Okay. Now here's another thing you need to know about research. Most research is not causational, meaning that we don't know that A causes B. For instance, when you go swimming, when you eat ice cream, your chances of drowning increase tremendously. It's true. Proven by research. You eat ice cream, the odds that you are going to drown skyrocket.
Within that 20 minutes?
Guess I should have been.
No, just in the day.
No, is that
I'm
what
not
they
sure.
eat?
Day?
Yeah, I don't know.
So that's
I don't know
true then.
if
You're not
that
just
is true.
giving an example.
Mhm.
Oh, I
No, this is true. So, should we make ice cream illegal?
No.
No. Why? Why do you know that's ridiculous? Even though this is true, your odds of drowning.
I haven't drowned yet. So when I was
You haven't
young,
drowned yet?
I drowned.
Oh, that's
You also haven't been shot with a gun yet. Either.
Because you should just know not to eat ice cream if you're going to go swimming.
You just know. Okay, so self-responsibility. Is ice cream really the problem?
No, it's eating in general when you go into.
No,
Well, not
it's not
eating
eating in general, because it's ice cream specifically.
Oh, ice cream.
It is a fact that you tend to eat ice cream when it's hot, and because it's hot, you also tend to go swimming. So the ice cream and the swimming have nothing to do with each other. Eating ice cream does not cause drowning. But if it's hot, see, there's a third variable. If it's hot, you're more likely to eat ice cream, and you're more likely to go swimming, and swimming is like the leading cause of drowning.
It was one about like the full moon and bank robbing.
Bank lobby?
Robbing.
Robbing.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what you're saying.
How like
I'm like, how is that
full moon-
connected to ice cream eating and drowning?
Oh, full moon and
The
crime.
bank lobby is conspiracy theory. They're going to the government and they're creating ice cream chemicals. Okay, so yeah, the full moon does actually affect mental health though. That's actually proven by research. It's weird as it is. I used to work at the San Bernardino Law Library down in San Bernardino, and every full moon, man, we had one male worker, and we gave him the front desk every full moon because we always had crazy people coming in. So, downtown San Bernardino, so it's not the safest area in the world.
100% not safe.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, so that is correlation. Correlation says these two variables are related. They may be cause and effect, but they may not be. There is some relationship, because we do know as ice cream eating goes up, drowning goes up. But they're not causing each other, they're being caused by a third variable entirely. So that's what we have to be careful. Yeah.
I've also heard another one about ice cream. It was ice cream, and it deals with the summer. It was ice cream. The more people who eat ice cream in the summer, it was correlated to however many assault charges there was, because the heat aggravates people.
Heat makes people grumpy. Yep. Until it gets above like 105, and then crime drops tremendously because nobody can move.
Nobody wants to go out.
Holidays also increase crime rates. But does Thanksgiving actually cause people to murder each other?
No.
No. It's simply the fact that your annoying family is at your house, and that's why you want to murder each other. So it's not the holidays itself that's to blame. It's the
Environment.
extended family that you normally avoid and are trying to make happy.
You're just like, why are you at my house now?
But
Yes.
events like Black Friday, those are actually correlated with a lot of
Yes.
assault and death.
And Black Friday, you could say that is causational. Black Friday itself is, no, actually not. I guess
It
that's not
depends
true.
from case to case.
It's people's bad behavior that's causing it.
It's just people.
It's always people, isn't it? All right, so that's correlation. Correlation means two variables are related. You can have a positive correlation. As one thing goes up, the other goes up. So as ice cream eating goes up, drowning goes up. That's a correlation, a positive correlation. Other things are opposite. So as purchases go up, room in your house goes down. That's a negative correlation. As criticism in the relationship increases, marital success decreases. That's a negative correlation. It's one of Gottman's findings. If you stonewall, which means, when you get in a point in a fight where you're so overwhelmed and you want to kill the other person, so you just shut down, that's stonewalling. As male stonewalling goes up, marital success goes down. So when men stonewall a woman, when you just stop talking, or you won't tell her what's going on or what you're thinking, or you leave the house or whatever, then that decreases marital success. You could also say, as stonewalling goes up, male stonewalling goes up, divorce goes up. That's a positive correlation. Okay. When women stonewall, men just go, finally she shut up. So it doesn't affect the divorce rate at all. So when you say to him, nothing's wrong, it's actually not doing anything to him. So it's not the best tactic to take.
I think it's actually doing more damage to yourself at that point.
Yeah, but it doesn't affect the divorce rate either way. But men, when you do that to her, divorce rate goes up by, I think it's like 80% chance of divorce in the next 5 years if you stonewall. So yeah, pretty significant. All right, let's see what else here. So the range in correlation can vary between positive 1 and negative 1. Okay, so a correlation of 0 means there's no relationship at all. So eating at In-N-Out has a correlation to alien invasion of probably 0. I don't think they're correlated at all, right? You eat at In-N-Out, you're not going to get invaded by aliens. Has no effect. Genetics and, a perfect correlation is positive 1. So every time one thing goes up, the other one goes up without fail. So jumping off a cliff and dying, probably pretty sure that's a correlation of positive 1, or at least really close to it. Okay, chances of survival is very slim. Negative 1 means when one goes up, the other one goes down every single time. So, I don't know what is a negative correlation. As, like I said before, as heat goes above 100, crime goes down to be negative correlation. That would probably be, that's a pretty strong correlation, but probably not the negative 1. Maybe like 0.8 would be a really strong, negative 0.8 would be a really strong correlation. Happiness and genetics is a positive correlation of roughly 0.7, depending on which study. So that's a very strong correlation. If you have genetics for happiness, you are more likely to be happy. Very strongly correlated. Okay? A couple of things. Intelligence and success in your job. What do you think the correlation of that is?
say that's more negative.
So the smarter you are, the less success you have?
Well, I wouldn't
I
say
think
it's
so.
like super negative.
It is a positive correlation. So the smarter you are, the more likely you are to have success. So the question is how strong is that correlation? And the truth is it's not super strong. It's roughly 0.3.
I knew it was going to be closer to 0 because not a lot of people like to be told they're wrong.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, like you're too smart to follow the rules and you think outside the box and that gets you in trouble. Like,
That's true,
I guess I
yes.
was going too far.
Yeah, being too smart can get you in trouble, especially if a dictator takes over. The dictator of Laos, the first thing he did was he killed all the university professors. And then he killed anybody who wore glasses because he thought that made you smart. Yeah, so. Afghanistan, they've attacked like the University of Kabul multiple times, which I actually applied and got a job at University of Kabul. And my family was like, no, please don't go there. And so I finally turned it down, and I think 2 weeks later they attacked the American dormitories and, killed, I think, 3 professors. I also got a job at the University of Bosnia. I still wish I had taken that. But when the Civil War was happening in Bosnia, they killed professors too. So professors always go first. All right, so that's about a correlation of 0.3. Now, grit, your determination to succeed, is much higher. I think that's like 0.8 or something. So the majority of factors in success is how gritty you are. How much determination do you have to succeed despite all obstacles? So intelligence is important. It does help, but it's not the only factor by any means. Culture, determination, education, those are all factors as well. All right, I think we talked about everything. So just remember, correlation is not causation. Just because 2 things are associated does not mean they're causing each other. If you get anything from a psych class, it should be that. So
There's
when
usually something in between that connects them both.
yes, because there could be a third factor easily. Yeah.
Is that just an evidence that you're, when you're trying to find causation, it's just kind of a linking
Yes.
piece of evidence?
Correlation suggests causation, but it does not mean that it absolutely is. It could be, but not necessarily. So you have to be really careful. And some things look like it's causational, but it's not actually. They're just correlated. It's just correlated, yeah. They're associated. For instance, interracial relationships, higher chance of divorce. Is there something about race itself that makes you incompatible with another race?
No.
No. Then why does it increase the chance of divorce?
Yeah.
Culture. Okay? My sister married an Egyptian, and she's Irish American, which is matriarchal. Women are in charge. Men, there are no men in Ireland, they're boys. Doesn't matter how old you are, you're going to be called a boy. There's women and there's boys. Women are in charge. She married an Egyptian from Egypt, which is a Muslim country, and if you're Muslim, you can have 5 wives. It is very patriarchal. Men are in charge. Do you think they're still married today? No. She's got 2 cute little half Egyptian children.
And he's got 4 wives.
And he's on board. He's actually not Muslim, so he's Coptic Christian, so he's legally not allowed to. Although he's in America, so he's not allowed to anyways. But yeah, so those 2 cultures, there's nothing wrong with an Irish person and an Egyptian getting married. If you had an Egyptian who was adopted into an Irish American family, he'd act like any other Irish American. But it's not the race itself that's the factor, even though race and interracial relationships and divorce are correlated, but it's the cultural differences that are causing the issues. For instance, Irish and African Americans are not associated with divorce. So if an Irish person marries a black person, they have a great chance of success. Because Irish culture and African American culture is very similar. You've got, like, the Irish were invaded by the English, and the English never conquered, but occupied Ireland for 7 centuries, and really mentally and physically beat the crap out of the
That's the
Irish.
7-Year War?
7-Year War was not Ireland, I don't think. I think that was.
I think I'm thinking of someone else then.
Yeah. But that's one of the reasons why the Irish say men are boys, because 700 years of English occupation, and the men were not allowed to do so. If you left your house, there's a chance you'd be killed, but women were allowed to walk around freely. So they developed this culture where women were in charge and men were subordinate, and had to depend on women. Which African American culture is also very matriarchal, and that's one of the reasons why Irish and Black people get along very well. So, interesting, right? So it's not race, they're correlated, but it's not race itself that's the issue, it's culture. All right, now research designs. And this is all important information because we will talk about many studies throughout this class. So I just want you to understand the idea of correlation, how we do different studies. The two most popular studies are cross-sectional and longitudinal. And this is regarding the population that you use. So cross-sectional is you do one experiment at one moment in time. Let's say I wanted to look and see what the attitudes of marriage are this year in 2018. So I'll take an interview, self-report questionnaire, and I'll pass it out to 10-year-olds, to 20-year-olds, to 30-year-olds, all the way up to 100-year-olds, and see what is everybody's attitude right now. That is cross-sectional. You take a cross-section of the entire population. Versus longitudinal is where you follow one age group all the way through their lifespan. So Gottman, for instance, he will find a couple that is about to get married. This is the guy who came up with the predicting divorce thing. He'll find a couple that is about to get married. He'll follow them through marriage, after marriage, all the way through divorce, or if they don't get divorced, he's still following couples 30 years later to see what's going on in their life. So that is a longitudinal.
A specific group of people.
We follow it the whole time, yeah.
I'm trying to remember what study it was, but there was this one psychological case where they were studying the development of two separated siblings, and they would come in periodically to check on them. I can't remember.
So that is a longitudinal study. So they go back to the separated siblings and see what's going on in their life. Longitudinal studies tend to be much more accurate because they're following. I mean, a cross-sectional study is you're going to assume that today's 10-year-old is going to have the same attitudes as when he's 80 years old. But the truth is that a 10-year-old growing up today is much different than the experience that a 10-year-old had, 70 years ago. So that could be inaccurate. However, cross-sectional study is instantaneous, it's very quick to do, and it's a lot cheaper to do than a longitudinal study. The longitudinal studies, most of the time I'd say a longitudinal study is better, but it's a lot more work to do and a lot more money, and sometimes it's just not realistic. So,
I have a question. Would the Stanford experiment be considered a cross-sectional design?
the prison experiment? No, I would say it was still longitudinal because even though it was short of duration, they followed the same people for the entire 6 days that they did the experiment. Cross-sectional would be, let's say you go to a prison and you interview all the prisoners in there and the prison guards to find out what their experiences have been. Yeah. Okay? All right, this is just a chart that shows you sort of graphically. Longitudinal study, you're following them across their lifespan. Cross-sectional is you do everybody all at once. With the assumption that a 30-year-old's experience today will be the same that a 70-year-old's experience was when he was 30. Okay? All right, I think we're getting pretty close to here. All right, so here's some things we also have to keep in mind for research. A lot of research that's been published is crap, okay, just FYI. So you really have to take research with a grain of salt. We sort of worship at the altar of scientific research and assume that if it's published, it must be right. That is not the case. Most researchers don't know how to do statistics, and so oftentimes what they say, this data says this, they're doing the wrong statistic, and they could be completely wrong. So it's one of the reasons why if you go into the science field, you should take a stats class to try to at least understand the basics of it. But most researchers will also hire a statistician, and then they just cross their fingers and hope that they did it right because they don't understand it themselves. So we also have different effects. So age effect is, could I have gotten this effect because of the age of the person? And so if I was going to do a therapeutic intervention with domestic violence perpetrators, did it work for them because this guy was 20, or does age have nothing to do with it and just works for everybody? So you've got to be careful because So like when I do domestic violence therapy, almost everybody I get in therapy is between 20 and 35 years old. That's the majority of perpetrators. Does my technique work with a 60-year-old?
Maybe, maybe not.
Maybe. I never had a 60-year-old. I have had a 70-year-old, but that was kind of I wouldn't have classified him as a domestic violence perpetrator. His wife punched him and he shoved her. And it's in California, you both get arrested. Yeah. So I think if somebody punched me in the face, and I might not react well either, but yeah. Cohort effect. The historical context that you're born in could be affecting something. So if I do an overeating intervention with people who were born in the Great Depression, it would probably need to be different than somebody who was born, 20 years ago. So the historical context is going to affect the results of your study. And most research has been done on college students, because professors are doing most of the research, and it's a lot easier to just say, here, fill out this questionnaire for extra credit, than to go and find a perfect cross-section of the population. The other biggest population that has been studied is military, which is mostly 20-some-year-old males, white males for the most part too. So for instance, medical field, for all of you nurses, when you get a lab result, you get the normal range, so like TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, I think Kaiser says it needs to be between like 0.5 and 5. That's the range for what your TSH level should be. Anybody have hypothyroidism in here, or hyper? No? I have hypo. That's when your thyroid gland is not producing enough thyroid hormone, and so it makes you tired. I feel like an Eeyore all my life. So this range, this original range, they found out what is the normal TSH level of white males in the military on average 22 years old. Now, if you are a black woman who's 60 years old, is that meaningful for you? We don't know. It could be the same, it could be totally different. And better research today, nurses remember this, has been narrowed to 0.3 to 3 is the ideal range. Okay, so narrowed the range of what's normal. And lowered it somewhat too. So this is what we find in research is we'll say this is what we found, so it must be true for everybody, and it's not necessarily. The time period you're born, the age you are, those could all affect you. And then also the time of measurement. When did you do this study? So if you look up a study that was done in 1920, does it apply to people today? Maybe.
Maybe, maybe not.
A lot of similarities between people in all time periods. You go to ancient Rome and you read some of their ancient graffiti, it's very similar. Like Herodotus was here, written on the wall. We're still writing the same crap on walls today. So there are still a lot of similarities, but it may not necessarily apply. So you also have to be careful of that. Okay? So point being, take research with a grain of salt. All right, so that is the end of chapter 1, already through an entire chapter.